despite all that terrifyingness, it's really hard to tell if this fight is going to go any different, if Francis Ngannou has improved against Stipe Miocic since their first fight. And I feel like I'll get to Stipe, but most of the questions for me lay with Ngannou, and they're kind of twofold. The first is really the mental side of things, because this is a guy who's not impervious to those struggles, and we saw that in the fight against Derek Lewis. Just his ego was on top of the world heading into that first title fight against Stipe, and he just got humiliated. The MMA pundits were like asking, is this guy even a mixed martial artist? Does he even like know what wrestling is? And that was over exaggerated, over the top, disrespecting Stipe a lot, in my opinion. But he did get thoroughly outclassed, and in a way that just left him like so helpless, especially like the cardio warfare Stipe implemented on him. And you saw that in the Derek Lewis fight, and just him having the mental struggles. Dana White like hanging him out to dry in the presser after that event. And he was the underdog coming in against Curtis Blades, and a lot of people thought the career was over of Francis Ngannou, and he did a fantastic job of revitalizing himself, evidently, as he's now the betting favorite going back in against Stipe, despite how their first fight went, and just on the basis of those last four fights. But Stipe Miocic isn't Jairzinho Rosenstrike. He isn't Junior Dos Santos. He is probably the face that Francis sees in his nightmares when he goes to sleep and flashes back to that night at UFC 220. So in a sense, he's exercised his demons, like coming off the low of that Lewis fight and turning his career around with this legendary run he's had. But I I think there's still something there, still like that cursed artifact at the bottom of the basement, or whatever you want to say. And that's the face of Stipe Miocic and the memories of that first night. So is he going to have the mental fortitude to get in there and perform at his best without doubting himself? That it's not going to be clear till it starts, no matter what he says in his pressers and interviews. And then the second question is how. Like, it's such a mix of keep what got you to the dance party, but clearly needing to do something better than he did in their first matchup. And it's just a problem of Stipe having answers that no one else in the division really has. He in the first fight, really, he won that fight in the first round. He was able to read everything Ngannou wanted to do and have an answer for it. If Ngannou wanted to swing wildly with hooks and uppercuts, Stipe was either able to duck out of the way and reset, or make him pay with a takedown and take some gas out of the tank. If he tried for one very brief stretch to jab with Stipe and make it a little more technical, and Stipe just hit him with the best shot he hit him with all night. Like, you're not the technical striker. If you want to play that game, I'm gonna beat you in spades. And then the wrestling was just top notch, like showing the pedigree of being the best heavyweight in the world. The running double legs across the cage, the singles to make him balance, the like ducking under shots and putting him on his back. I think it was just such a virtuoso wrestling performance that there's not that much to break down and talk about. The like mercilessness of just keeping a hand always on the back of his neck just to make him suffer and gas, and then like finding the body shots, the elbows, whenever they're there outside of the main goal of making this giant man exhausted. So that's the question for me. If Ngannou wants to play the technical game, I don't know if he can against Stipe. Like, he was only 5 years into his mixed martial arts career. Now, 3 years later, that's almost doubling the time spent in the gym, time spent at the experience. And you think that first year, second year probably wasn't as high level training as he's been able to get in recent years. So I'm sure there are improvements to the technical game, and you've seen hints of that in his very brief fights. He's been sitting behind that jab. He set up the shot against Blades with a lot of feints to get there. So there's something to be said for sure for having a more technical delivery mechanism for his power. I just don't know how technical he should get, because if he completely gets away from that wildness that like worked for him, you saw best in the Jairzinho Rosenstrike fight and sort of in the JDS fight as well, of just, I'm gonna swing a hook and when it lands, that's it. If he gets away from that too much and just tries to be a completely different fighter in there, I feel like Stipe is just going to outdo him and outread him in the jabs and leg kicks. But if he gets too wild, then again, I think Stipe is just going to read him and make him pay with takedowns and timed shots. So it's going to be about finding that happy medium for Francis Ngannou between setting up the shot, staying technical, and enough to not be read by Stipe, but like not getting away from your bread and butter, not hiding and putting away those wild swinging shots. And I think there's going to be a lot of mental pressure bearing down on him as he tries to navigate that balance. On Stipe's side, since then, he's had his trilogy with Daniel Cormier, getting knocked out in the first round of the first one and winning the second two fights. Stipe Miocic, the only guy who has two of my top 5 all-time favorite MMA performances under his belt, the aforementioned one against Francis Ngannou, and then that second fight against Daniel Cormier. So maybe I'm a little biased when I break it down and say I think Stipe beats him at both ends of the technical spectrum, and if Ngannou wants to get too wild. The question really is he a better or worse fighter after that trilogy with Daniel Cormier? He's gone a lot of hard minutes. He's aged. I think he's 37, 38 years old now, but gotten some valuable octagon time. You've got to think the wrestling is better after the training camps he put in preparing for those fights. Of course, Ngannou was preparing for Curtis Blades and Cain Velasquez, so he's certainly got his fair share of reps as well. Yeah, I'm expecting the best, the elitist level of mixed martial arts you get at the heavyweight division from Stipe Miocic, because he's given me no reason to expect anything less. Just a guy who is a phenomenal striker with terrifying knockout power, a guy with great wrestling. I mean, stuffing Cormier's takedowns and taking him down himself kind of says it all. You don't need a much bigger accolade than that. And it's just a question of does he have the explosiveness and the reflexes to do those first 2-3 minutes against Ngannou again, because he needs that. If he's the only guy really who's had the answer of when Francis Ngannou wants to explode, having both the boxing sense and ability to read the shots and then the body to get the hell out of the way, because those shots don't even need to land half clean to knock guys out. It's so terrifying. And you saw, like, I don't think Ngannou landed much more than a glancing blow in that first round, like just skimming, and they left bruises on Stipe's face. So I love Stipe as an underdog until he gives me reason to doubt. I'm not going to. It's such a funny thing with Francis Ngannou having like these beautiful showings, but in so few minutes that it's hard to know what to expect. Um, it's one of those fights though where it's hard to feel like there's a loser. I mean, Ngannou has such a fantastic story as well, working in sand mines in Cameroon. um, moving to Paris, being homeless, walking into an MMA gym, and just completely turning his life around, already having achieved probably just so much more than any he could have imagined at those times in Cameroon, and such a enormous inspiration to so many young people in Africa, I'm sure. So if he can complete that last step and put a belt around his waist, that would be huge. But I can't root against Stipe. I just can't do it. So it's going to be such a fun main event. I am probably not going to breathe for the first 2 minutes of it. Cannot wait.